was thinking about just some very basic things. What, basically what it means when you have a fully executed contract. And
Right.
really everything stems from that because all our timelines run from that. And people always say to me, for me it seems round, but that's what I do. So what a fully executed contract means is both sides have signed, and that's when all your time frames, meaning your mortgage contingencies, run.
Yeah.
And so that's really like if you say on or about 60 days, the 60 days runs from the date the contract's fully executed. So
Right.
that's very important, and that's what the whole transaction stems from. So it's a very basic thing.
Right. And I think it's so unique to New York, right, Leslie? Because you have people, like so many people moved into New York from other areas, and they might be accustomed to, they see a home, they put an offer in, they get into contract the very next day, right? I mean, maybe the real estate agent writes it up or, whomever. But in New York, it's when, especially like when I'm working with first time home buyers, they'll be like, oh, my offer was accepted. Like, I'll have my contract to you tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah, you're not going to have your contract to me tomorrow. That's not how it works, right? There's due diligence that the attorneys are doing. And oftentimes they will send me that like the only the contract that they signed. And I'm like, this isn't the fully executed contract. But you said something else in that, which brings up another sort of legal term here in New York, and that's the on or about.
Right.
Like if you have a closing that's on or about 30 days or on or about 60 days, maybe tell everybody what that means. Because, like, if the closing date, say, is on or about November 20th, are they closing on November 20th?
Absolutely
No.
not.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so I always say to people, do not pack your trucks. No matter what day, everyone has in their mind whatever date is in that
Right.
contract. So if the
Right.
contract says December 15th, they think they're closing December 15th.
Right.
So pretty much I have like built in, and most attorneys have, that is a 30-day window from that
Right.
time where really no one can really do much of anything.
Right.
Right.
So, I always say, we actually have a clause in our contract that says, don't schedule things for a specific date. No one's obligated to close before that date. And basically there's a window of time on either side by 30
Right.
days. So it kind
Right.
of is not a standard date, but where in New Jersey or Connecticut, it's a more formal date than New York.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
and it's no one, if you're from a different state, it's very confusing to people.
It can be totally confusing. I know here on the lending side, our, operations or closing department will say, is this closing date that you have in our system a real date? Is it a hard date?
Right.
Or, is it an on or bond? And,
Right. Right.
I'm like, hey, it's right now that's an on or about date. And once, especially if somebody's getting a mortgage, right, you're going to wait for your lender to clear your file for closing. That here's the other thing in New York, right? I always say everybody has an attorney. The seller has an attorney, the buyer has an attorney, the bank has an attorney that the buyer pays for. And so once the loan is cleared, we let the bank attorney lets the other attorneys know, and that's when it gets, ultimately it gets scheduled.
Related to this, that would be, and you could speak about it, Leslie, is when you have a time of the essence closing. Then
Mm,
the date is more
Yes.
critical.
Yes. I mean, you don't see,
Too many.
too many. We try to avoid those, the time of the essence.
Right.
Really puts yourself, so as an attorney, we try not to put those in, and most attorneys aren't like agreeable to it because it's like a hard date.
right.
So if you don't get your down payment, that's what it basically means. And there's certain steps that have to be taken in order to do a time is of the essence.
Right.
Right.
Track where, let's say you pass those 30 days that we were discussing and you want to issue a TOE, which says, you have to give a reasonable amount of time to close, which usually is basically there's some case law on it, but basically it's approximately 2 weeks that you serve the TOE, and certain steps have to be taken per the contract. And once that's done, then potentially that other side can lose their down payment. So
Right.
I know. I actually have received a time of essence on this morning, as a matter of fact, for a client that, they went into contract back in July. I think I'm the second lender that they've come
Right.
to. So it's been some time, and now the seller's like, okay, this is it. Like we got to close by this date, or else,
Right.
I'm putting it back on the market. I'm taking your deposit, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. I
What
think
about, oh, I was going to say, like, another legal term that we discuss all the time, and we've even talked about it on here, is contingency, right? A lot of people don't know, like, I'll say when somebody comes to me, I'm like, well, make sure you get a mortgage contingency, and they're like, well, wait, what does that mean, right?
right.
And this is where I mean, I'm not the attorney, but in my own words, I'm going to say a contingency is a period of time that you're given, contractually, to appraise the property, and secure your financing. And so if you're unable to secure the financing for the terms that are set, typically there are terms that are set on the contract, like for a maximum loan amount, et cetera. And then you have that time, and if you don't, meet that time,
Right.
then the contract can be canceled, right?
It's interesting you speak about contingencies. Like, I have a transaction now where they waive the appraisal contingency. So the
Right.
appraiser called me yesterday and set up an appraisal. When I notified the selling agent, I said, oh, I think you're not doing an appraisal. I said, why? I said, we're having financing. She says, well, you're waiving it. I said, it doesn't mean that they're not doing it. It just
Right.
they're waiving it. It's not, whatever number comes in, they're willing to deal with. So
Exactly.
important,
They would just come up with the difference.
Right.
right? Or renegotiate the price. But we're
Right.
confident that it will come because I did the comps already before she signed the contract because I was concerned. But it's interesting the way people see things. And this is another realtor. I was kind of surprised. I said to her, even if if they're waiving it, it doesn't mean they're not doing it because they're getting financing.
Right.
So these terms become very important.
Right.
I think that people all, when I say I'm doing my due diligence, people don't really understand what I'm
What
saying,
that
right?
means, right? Right.
So for me, it's very important. So I have
Right.
an inspection this Monday. So I had time, and I like to do this before people spend money on an inspection if we can, whereby I visited the building department. I made sure all the permits are closed. Or in this case, permits were not taken out for certain renovations. So I want to check if there's a survey. I want to, I really look at the building department, at the assessor, with the assessor cards. I try to get all the taxes. They were short $800 on their taxes. So I like to get as much information prior to somebody spending $1,000 or whatever, plus or minus,
Right.
on an inspection. So doing your due diligence, I think, is very important as a
Right.
realtor. I could tell people do not, and and it can affect really the uh, people's willingness to proceed on the transaction,
Oh,
especially.
absolutely. I mean, and there's so we all in our respective, jobs, right? Michelle's doing legal due diligence. I'm doing
We lost you, Maria.
calling. Um, I'm having I do due diligence, ensuring that there's not going to be any issues when they come to get the financing, right? We're looking at their income, their assets, their credit. I'm looking at, if they're buying a condo or a co-op, the project. I know when there's a condo or co-op involved, Michelle's doing her due diligence on, on the project as well. So I always say that, I don't think that most of our clients know, how they certainly don't know how the sausage is made, right? And all that goes into, like, all that's going on in the background, so that they can seemingly have, as smooth of a buying process and closing process, right?
Right. I think
Absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
like for due diligence, like from like let's say a co-op perspective,
Right.
you know, you
Just
want to
gonna
read
say
the
that.
you want to read
Right.
the minutes.
Yeah.
You want, I mean, that's like because the minutes actually sometimes tell you nothing, but on other occasions I've found like some like that I actually found that there was a lawsuit related to one unit that my client was buying. It could be you know, there could be issues where there's leaking into the apartments or there's
Oh,
a big
yes. And Michelle, I bet there are some co-ops that won't send you those minutes electronically to read, that you have to go down to like the managing agent's office and read them right there, because it's kept under lock and key, right? So it's a lot of work.
Co-op in the condo, when we get a listing for a co-op or a condo or a HOA even, and or if we have the buyer, the first things we do, we ask for the bylaws, the regulations, a purchase application, the last 2 years financials, hopefully, and a prospectus from the
Right.
seller. So hopefully we get this all, and we also send them a co-op, excuse my voice, I have a laryngitis, a co-op condo form, that we try to get as much information as possible for the prospective buyer or seller. So it's very
Right.
do this due diligence upfront.
right before your best position is
Yeah.
before you sign anything to
Right.
know everything about it.
Right.
Once you contract, people say,
It's too
oh,
late.
you know, we'll do it subject to. You're better off once you release that money into someone else's trust
It's a
account. It's hard.
lot harder to get it back. Well, that, I mean, that this we kind of come full circle, right, with why the contract takes, typically at least a week or two, right, to get to going into contract versus that fully executed contract, right? Because it's between that time that the offer is accepted to the time that it's fully executed that all of this due diligence is being done, right? And the borrower too, right? Because if they're buying a home, they're doing a home inspection. I mean, I
Right.
consider that part of their due diligence as
Right.
well. Yeah.
I think all talking about co-ops and condos or HOAs, it's very important to know why your client is buying, or even a house, right? If a client is buying it for a certain reason, it's very important to do part of your due diligence if they need to buy that property for a specific purpose. Maybe they're investing, or maybe they want to put a pool on, or whatever their need is. It's very important to look even at a title report
Yeah.
to see if there are restrictions that would not allow them to do what they want to do.
Right.
So that's also part of the
Right.
due diligence to really understand why your client is buying the property,
Right.
right?
Agreed. Absolutely. I mean, yes, that's very important on the lending side too, right? Occupancy and the type of occupancy is a huge deal in lending, and making sure that that's properly reflected on the application they make, right? So it's become a really it's become an even bigger hot topic, if you will, with like the governing agencies like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where I've heard that they have even started doing they're starting to do some due diligence in checking after the fact, if somebody put on there that this is going to be their primary residence, that it is indeed actually their primary residence.
Right.
So yeah.
So I think this topic we can go on and on
Yeah.
probably, right? And
Yeah, there's so many terms.
and so many different ramifications of all of what we do. But I think the important thing is that we really try to really protect our client, whether we have the buyer, the seller, or legally, or in your capacity. I think it's very important. And there are so many nuances of all the language that we use. It's very important to understand the implications of everything and really understand. If you don't understand anything during the buying and selling process, you really should ask us, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't, I mean, I think that we probably all try to use layman's terms, right, when we're speaking with our clients, because you can't expect that everybody's going to understand what certain words mean. But but hey, sometimes it slips out. I mean, I throw contingency around all the time because I'm using it every day. I'm thinking everybody understands what that means, but you can't make the assumption that everybody. I mean, all the time, somebody will say to me, "Oh, what does that mean exactly? What does it mean to ask for a mortgage contingency?"
I think
So,
it's really important to understand the definition, but also the implications.
yes,
And that's something that comes with, I think, experience.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. And the crossover between even our three industries
Right.
is so much, and the communication and understand and getting your client to give you all the names and all the contacts so that we all could communicate to make the transaction easier, right, and streamline the process. I think that's
100%.
Paramount. Yep, agreed. Yep,
That everybody works together to kind of get to the closing table in a
yeah,
time fashion. But
awesome.
I think it's a good topic, and we should continue these discussions next Friday.
Yeah, and
And
if anybody has any, terms that they've heard that they're confused about, like reach out to us and we can discuss that on another call.
okay, great.
All right.
Great week.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.